I use that word a lot, and then I always feel stupid when I go back to do the editing because funner isn't a word.
Funner?
Funner's not a word. It's not a word.
Dictionary, bro. I swear it is now.
It might be, but it feels like it's not.
If
And I say it
more
all the time, and
When
then
one person says it, it's a word. Just like
That
probably.
means plugging's a word now.
it is.
Probably.
Probably, I know what it means.
Probably.
And it's probably not in the dictionary.
Probably not. But you know what it is,
Yeah.
and so it's a word. Because every Sealy that I've ever known says probably.
Probably. All right, Mr. Seeley. So we spent a number of hours today on our bikes, right?
Yes.
And just a quick recap: we spent time on a 2017 KTM 250XC carbureted bike, 2018 KTM 250 XC-W TPI EFI bike. Its brother, the Husqvarna TE250i, which is also fuel injected. And then we spent a little bit of time as well on a 2018 KTM 250 XCF.
Yeah.
Let me start out with the fuel injected bikes because it's kind of a hot topic of the day. We rode two different bikes. Did you have any preconceived notions about what you were going to find, and were you surprised?
Yeah. I thought that the power was going to be kind of like an on-off switch. I didn't know how modular the throttle response would be.
Why did you think it was going to be on-off?
Just because fuel injection, in my mind and experience in other fields and applications, it just kind of seems to be that way. Where a carburetor, you get a big gulp of air, and then the air draws the fuel through. With fuel injection, it's mechanical, or it's controlled with pressure, and it sprays based on air pressures or whatever information the bike collects. And so without that draw of air, it just...
You just thought it would be very digital and very
Right.
and very non-organic. It was going to be almost
Exactly.
forced.
Yeah, I just thought it would be like, you're getting fuel, you're not getting fuel, you know. I didn't know how well you'd be able to modulate the power with the throttle. But I was quite surprised on both bikes. Very easy to control the throttle and control the engine, modulate the power with the clutch and the throttle. Power delivery was pretty much flawless.
What about the amount of power? Was it because we rode other bikes? You had ridden your actually really hopped up YZ250X for the first part of the day. Then you come back and you immediately go onto the EFI KTM. Was it down on power?
It definitely doesn't have as much power as
your bike.
as my YZ, but
That your bike, we're talking, it's got Electron, high compression head, tuned pipes, all these different things.
right, it's pretty hot, but it's not like it didn't have enough power. It had a lot of power, and the power was really, really smooth, which actually I think helps with that switchiness that I was talking about. So I thought for sure I was going to like the Husqvarna better because it has a linkage. I thought the suspension was going to be the ticket, and I have to say that that's not the case. I liked the KTM better. I thought it cornered better. That could be a setup thing. We're really splitting hairs because both bikes are pretty incredible. If I had to take one home and that was my bike, I'd live with it just fine with a big smile on my face.
Yeah, and on the setup thing, I tried to set, as I've mentioned on some of the other interviews, I tried to set them up as close to the same as possible, identical tires, and I set all the clickers and I did all the suspension things to the manual spec for the standard setting. So yeah, some of that maybe could have been tuned out, but all of us were surprised, including you, that the one you liked better
With the KTM.
was the KTM with the PDS.
Yep.
What about, okay, so let's switch gears and talk about the EFI versus the carburetor bike, because we rode the 2017 250 XC, which you've been on record before as saying it might have been the best or most well-rounded 252 stroke you'd ever been
I
on.
think it's the best two-stroke that's ever been built to date, period.
Even though you love your Yamaha, but you're saying that KTM is really hard to beat.
The engineering of the bike, the way the engine functions with that
Counterbalance.
balancing shaft, it's amazing. It's so smooth. The luggability is incredible. It's my favorite run over whatever you point at bike because it will just go where you point it.
So what did you notice between the two? Carburation versus the EFI, and the carbureted bike, we all agreed, ran phenomenal.
Yeah,
So what were the nuances that you noticed between EFI and carburetors today, swapping back and forth?
I think initial throttle response on the EFI is a little bit quicker. I'm not saying that that's good or bad. It just happens a little bit faster.
It's instantaneous.
It is.
Instant
And
feedback.
that's a little bit along the lines of that kind of switchy feeling that I anticipated, but it was much, much more manageable than I thought. I mean, cover the clutch a little different, and there was no problem. We rode through some really technical stuff today, and I didn't have any issue controlling the bike. It's just the way the power delivers, you feel a slight difference.
Yeah.
In the mid-range and top end, I couldn't tell any difference at all.
Speaking of mid-range and top end, did you notice any difference between the Husky and the KTM, how the power came on? Knowing that they both have aftermarket pipes, I tried to get them as close as possible, but they're not the exact same pipe. Did you think one had more power in one place than the other?
Yes, the KTM with the FMF gnarly torque and the turbine core silencer, the power is really low. It has a lot of torque right off of idle, and then pulls really hard through the mid-range. And I think that the Husqvarna was opposite. It was a little softer on the bottom and had a really, really strong mid-range surge to top end. And I think that's just a difference in the pipe.
Yeah, could be. What about cockpit, rider positioning, and that Explorer fork? I know that you were pretty vocal on that today on the trail. What were your thoughts on that Explorer versus the Air fork? Let's go there. Explorer versus Air fork. What did you think?
Am I going to get lynched if I tell the truth?
You will not get lynched at all. I want you to tell the truth.
The internet will blow up when I say that I like the Explorer fork better.
Why?
I felt that I had better feedback from the wheel to the bar. I felt more confident with what the front wheel was doing.
Did that surprise you?
Yes. Yes, it did. I'm not used to air forks. I haven't ridden air forks. I'm not a big believer in air forks, but the KTM's got the best air forks that I've ridden, but I haven't spent a year on the bike like you guys have. So coming from conventional spring forks, that Explorer fork, there were times when I felt like, you could boing the thing off of a marshmallow, but that's more of a setup issue than the fork itself. And I just really liked the positive feedback. I really felt connected to the ground with the front wheel, and with the air fork, I didn't feel that as much.
What about weight? We know that the bikes all had different weights. We know the EFI bikes, one was 7 pounds heavier, one was 14 pounds heavier. What did you know? Did you notice any weight differences between the three different bikes?
The KTM XC-W, and then all the other letters that go with it, what felt the lightest on the trail.
Even though we know it's heavier than the other KTM, the carburetor one.
Yeah, it felt slightly lighter on the trail than the Husqvarna. The Husqvarna felt very light and nimble on the trail. And of the three bikes, the 250 XC probably felt the heaviest.
Was that maybe you think that's a stability thing? Why do you think it felt heavier? What's your gut feeling on it?
Chassis geometry. I think maybe the XC-W and the Husqvarna are set up a little bit more for the woods. Really, really tight turning. Really focusing on getting traction to the front wheel, in combination with the air fork and just the stance of the bike. I think when you're going fast and you're blasting through some whoops or something like that, the XC feels a little bit more stable. Not enough that you can't go fast on the other bikes, but it feels a little more planted, which is good. That heavy feeling helps you stay straight through rough terrain and things that are going to deflect you. But then in the tight stuff, when you have to balance, those two bikes felt like they had such a low center of gravity. They felt really easy to balance, and they just felt like they moved around on the trail.
Yeah.
Really, really light. So I really think it's just a chassis thing. I don't know.
At the end of the day, we did a drag race, and I just want to mention something I forgot in the other interviews is that I had put the 250XC completely back to stock. It's a stock carburetor, it's a stock head, all those things. It does have a spark arrestor, but it's the stock pipe. We did multiple drag races, you, me, and Sam together. You were on the carbureted bike, and Sam and I were on EFI bikes. What happened in those drag races? Did one bike shine where the other bike didn't?
I felt like they were pretty much dead even.
How are you doing? Is that bike holding with these?
Yeah.
It is?
I think me and Sam were dead even that time.
Okay. We'll do the roll start again. Three, two, one, go!
Whoever got the best start or the most traction seemed to pull ahead. And then once we were in about third gear, that's where they were, and they were straight up even. So I wouldn't say there was a clear winner. They all felt very, very powerful.
Okay, so last question. If you had to take one of these bikes and ride it for the next year, which one would it be and why?
Today, I felt the most comfortable on the XC-W, but like I said, I felt like I could boing the forks on the marshmallow. So when I started going fast through the whoops or into the rocks, I bottomed that bike out consistently. So because of that, I would probably pick the XC just for the all-around. I do so much variety of riding. Sometimes we're down here in the wide open desert. Sometimes I'm at the top of a mountain. Sometimes I'm in the woods. Sometimes I'm in the sand. And I just feel like the XC is more balanced for all of those types of conditions, where maybe the XC-W is a little more specialized to tight terrain. The bike goes incredibly well, incredibly fast. It's very comfortable. I actually enjoyed riding the soft suspension. It just wasn't holding me up at speed through the whoops and the chop. It was very, very comfortable. But as soon as the trail slowed down, I was probably the most comfortable on that bike. But I'd still probably pick the XC as the best all-around bike that I'd want to own.
I lied. It wasn't the last question. Did the gearing play into that at all, between why you think you'd probably go with the XC? Was that a gearing thing also? Does that come into it?
So, yes and no. I think that for the kind of riding that we do, the XC transmission is probably a little bit more friendly to that type of terrain. I'm used to riding motocross bikes, and it's a little closer to an MX style transmission. So I think that's more that I'm used to that than that it's a problem. Because the XC-W pulled every gear just fine. There was no issue. First is a little low, but it sure does make it nice when you're trying to do pivot turns or you're in tight rocks. So cool. They both have their place.
Okay. Well, I'm surprised that you said you like the XC-W the best. That's what we pretty much all said. I didn't come out and say that 100%, but I kind of want to.
That bike surprised me. That's the one that I was sure I was going to like the least. So it surprised me. It went against. I'm going to pick that one as my favorite bike of the day, against my preconceived notions against it. You know.
It's pretty telling.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.